For the first time since the Great Depression, more adults in America are living with their parents. What do you do when your efforts to empty the nest fail? Keep watching to find out. All right, so what I want to talk about, the first point is you have to know your kid. Get to know your kid. Understand what it is that's driving this behavior. The premise of this video is that the empty nest effort failed. So that means that your kid is either 18 years old and they're still living at home after you had come up with a plan to have them exit, or they're 22 years old and anything in between. Maybe they just got done with college and now they're back in the house, or they didn't go to college the whole time and they're back in the house, or they went out to get a job and now they're back in the house. You're faced with this situation where they are back in the house after an attempt at empty nesting. Get to know your kid, understand exactly what's driving it. An exercise I like to use is something called 7 levels deep. And that's where you ask the question, why 7 times? Why are you here? Well, I don't have money to go anywhere else. Why don't you have money? You get the drift. So you can have your child go off on their own and answer that, or you can ask the questions as they write down the answers. You can have a discussion, whatever works for you all, whatever the great way to get to it. But what that exercise does, it gets down to the real root cause of what's going on. And once you have that root cause, then you can turn around and start to formulate a new plan to make sure that this empty nesting session or process doesn't fail the next time. So it's so key going into those discussions after the failed attempt to say, okay, we've got to set some boundaries. And that's the next point. Set some boundaries, agreed upon boundaries between the two of you. Maybe you didn't do that the first time as a parent. Well, now it's time to say, okay, here are the boundaries. It could be by the time you're this old, whatever boundaries that you set. So the goal here is, again, I want to keep reiterating, you want to empty nest because God wants you to empty nest too. It says in the Bible that kids need to leave their parents and go off on their own. That's what needs to happen for this world to prosper and flourish. We can't have kids sticking around after the empty nesting attempt had failed. And there's horror stories out there about kids out forever in their parents' home, and they're not really adding value to society. And they've been given a gift. You think about it that way, parents, they've been given a gift. So it's up to you to set up those boundaries in a way that both of you are clear, or all three of you are clear on what the end goal is. And then, as you know, once you set a boundary, you can't compromise the boundary. You have got to, I'm saying that, there could be way crazy circumstances. However, if you set appropriate boundaries that are realistic, time frames that are realistic, and you're going through this thoughtful process of setting the boundaries, a lot will be uncovered, and your child will have an action plan as a result of setting these boundaries. Here's what I'm going to do to achieve this goal of getting out and being independent, whether it be going to school or getting a job, whatever your intent is with this empty nesting effort. They have got to have a plan in place. That's part of the boundaries. They've got to create it, and then you've got to talk about the consequences. Okay, if this doesn't happen, what is the consequence? If this does happen, what is the consequence? Throw in a positive one. I've seen this happen before where a child wanted a car, and the parent said, okay, if you can save, let's say $2,000 by this date, however many months off, I will match it. But if you don't save the $2,000, guess what? I'm not matching it. So you're going to have to find out how to get a car on your own. That's an incentive, a positive incentive. And then you ask the child, okay, so if you don't have $2,000 on this date, what does that mean? Well, that means you don't match it, and I don't get that $4,000 to go buy a car. Yes. So your child is stating the consequence. So they know it. They've said it out loud. So important to do that. And then the third step is talk about the situation with others, other people who have been through it. Maybe you've got friends or family that have been through a failed empty nest and then they succeeded the second time. Talk about it with those people. Talk about it with people who have been successful at it. Don't talk about it with somebody who hasn't experienced it. Don't talk about it with somebody that still has somebody living at home too, and they're like, oh, here's all the things I've tried. That's just going to be spinning the wheels. Find somebody. There's a lot of research there. There's information online that you could look to figure this out and to get the best wisdom. Of course, when you're doing this, take a look at the Bible. Read the Bible. The Bible has a lot of great insight on parenting and how a man should leave his mother and father. A person should leave the nest, if you will. It needs to happen. It's a benefit to everybody involved. There are no positives to it. Short-term enabling will not help that child long-term. I used to always think about it. My number one job as a parent is to raise an independent child, and I would add to it now with my new awareness, an independent child following Jesus. That's my goal as a parent, to raise an independent child who follows Jesus. That's it. That's my goal. If I can do that and they can go off into the world and duplicate that, this world would be a much better place. I get excited just thinking about it. So if I want to share a little bit about my own personal experience too with this. People often ask, how long does empty nesting syndrome last? Well, it just depends on the situation, obviously. But a key to that is, I think it's the parents. Are you enabling your child at all? Are you really holding on more than the child is to this empty nesting? Are you saying, hey, I've always got a room here for you. We've got a room. That's not good. You want to, of course, you want your kids, if they're in trouble, to be able to come to you. However, you have to be very careful on how much you play into that. They need a little kick out of the nest. If you make it too comfortable, if you're washing their clothes while they're at college or while they're still working and living at home, if you're doing all those things for them, that's not good. You're holding on more than they are. You're not really serious about the empty nesting thing. Stages of empty nest syndrome, severe empty nest syndrome, all those things. Again, it is depending on if you've not taken any of these steps once you've failed at empty nesting. I think it's you're putting yourself in jeopardy for continuing to have to deal with this issue. So don't do that. I would say don't do that. Take some of these steps. And if you're trying to do this in isolation too, that's a tough thing to do. My own experience growing up, I knew from my parents that at 18, I was out. I was either going to have a job and get an apartment on my own, or I'm going to go away to school. But I knew that. So I was excited about that. I literally couldn't wait because I wanted to be out there on my own. And I just felt like this would be a big step for me and that I can do it. They spoke those affirmations into me that, yes, you can do it. So it wasn't a big deal. It was like, oh yeah, I know I'm going to do it. And I was fortunate too that I grew up in Chicago and the kids in my neighborhood had the same thing happening at their home. So I had other kids who were in the same boat, so we could relate. So there's a good tip too, is keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on that is the environment that your kids are coming from, and then kind of environment that you're setting. So that was a key for me, is I knew it. So if you're in this situation where you didn't set those expectations, you can do it now. That's all. If they're 23 and they're living at home, or they're 19 and they're living at home, and the failed empty nest process happened a year ago, 6 months ago, it's time right now to take those first steps of understanding your kid, setting boundaries, and then getting some help from other folks. So that's the key. It kind of comes full circle, I think. So make sure, from my own experience, that the boundaries are clear, the expectations are clear. You can generate some incentives. You know your kid, and of course, you've gone through that first steps to be able to understand your kid. So you're going to go through the incentives. You're going to understand what's driving them from the 7 levels deep exercise and all of those things. And you should have no problem on your second go around being successful with this empty nest syndrome. Subscribe with the notification bell to receive regular updates. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button to see more like this, and then comment down below. This can be with questions or answers to questions or anything that comes to your mind. We will see you next time on this amazing journey from isolation to community, where the next step is freedom. And join us every Wednesday as we drop another video at about 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Take care.